Now, Nashville is trying to replace its gigantic Nissan Stadium with a $2.1 billion stadium with a smaller capacity. According to some, it's going to be the beating heart of the Tennessee sports community, but according to others, it's going to be nothing but a major tax burden. So why does such a tiny stadium have such a massive price tag? Well, let's discuss it in today's episode of Built Up. Nashville's NFL aspirations and dreams grew much bigger than their stadium could contain. So they looked at the 30-year-old Nissan Stadium in the heart of the city and asked how much the renovations would cost. Consultant firms came up with forecasts ranging from $600 million on the low end to around $1.95 billion on the high end to bring the facility to first-class standards. That's when Nashville decided to change direction and go with a different strategy. They decided to build a new Nissan Stadium for $2.1 billion. But before getting approved for funding, this stadium needed to fulfill a lot of demanding criteria. First, it had to be much better than the old Nissan Stadium, not just in terms of fan experience, but also in terms of sturdiness. Of course, while building the new stadium, construction work was not allowed to stop the Titans from using the stadium. That's like building a skyscraper downtown and not disturbing the local traffic. Definitely not an easy task. Plus, they had to design a modern multi-purpose venue capable of hosting NFL events and concerts alike. However, after the city voted, the funding was approved, and Manica Architecture was chosen to design the new dome stadium with a capacity of between 55,000 and 60,000 people and around 170 luxury suites. Manica also envisioned an artificial turf field, while the Titans signed a 30-year lease on the project. The structure also had to be visually stunning, which is why Manica designed it to look like a space-age palace. This jaw-dropping stadium will be built by Turner Construction, AECOM Hunt, and Hastings will be the general contractors building the stadium. And speaking of which, they began construction in 2024, and in 3 years, the project is ready to open its gates to the public. The structure itself will cover an area of 1.7 million square feet with a sleek, circular, translucent roof. This allows natural light to pass easily when it's sunny outside while protecting the fans during rainy or snowy days. The luxury seats will include comfortable seating areas where fans can enjoy the game in style. These areas will look more like a first-class boarding lounge. But the best part is that this futuristic stadium will not be built on top of the old one, but right next to it. This way, the Titans can play their games in peace while the construction crews work on the new stadium. When completed, the old stadium will be torn down and become part of Nashville's East Bank redevelopment plan. Now, as always, don't forget to subscribe if you liked the video so far. Now, you might be wondering why Nashville will ever even need to replace the old stadium with a new one. Well, simply put, the stadium doesn't meet the high expectations of Nashville fans, and it sure as hell doesn't meet the team's future aspirations. Sure, the Nissan Stadium has hosted countless games in the past and had some pretty unforgettable moments, but it's time for a big change. With many gigantic structures exposed to the elements, Nissan Stadium is in dire need of a refurbishment. Nashville wants to someday host the Super Bowl, and it can't do that with a 30-year-old stadium. In fact, most NFL stadiums across the US have better amenities than the aging Nissan Stadium. And sure, Nashville could have waited a couple of more years before completely redesigning the stadium, but think about the fans. How would you feel watching an 8K 3D movie on your grandma's tube TV? Sure, you could say that you watch the movie, but the question is one of enjoyment. With only a few premium seating options, even those people who have the means can't enjoy the game in full comfort. The current stadium seats are divided into 3 levels of seating, with premium seats located in the stadium's 2 towers. But Nashville wants to drastically improve the fan experience during football games and concerts. And to be honest, this is an open-air stadium. It's all fun and games when it's sunny outside. But what about watching a football game when it's raining? What about wind and snow? All of these natural factors play a key role and negatively impact the fan experience. On top of that, Nashville wants to host the Super Bowl one day, and it sure can't do that at the old and outdated Nissan Stadium. It was first opened on August the 27th, 1999, and has since then remained a multi-purpose stadium at the heart of Nashville, Tennessee, and the home of the NFL Tennessee Titans and the Tigers from Tennessee State University. To build this $290 million marvel, architectural firms Hawk Sport, which later became Populous, McKissack and Moody Nolan joined their efforts together with engineer Thornton Tomasetti to design the stadium, while Bovis Construction and Beers Construction are responsible for the current Nissan Stadium. Inside the stadium, there are 69,143 seats, and it has the capacity to welcome around 69,000 fans during a regular match. The most people ever packed inside the stadium was 73,874 fans who came to see an Ed Sheeran concert, and even this was a big stretch. Now, imagine a high-profile event like the Super Bowl being hosted in a stadium like Nissan. Sure, the structure is strong enough to hold the event, but when you consider that the average ticket price for the Super Bowl is $8,600, fans aren't looking for just okay. For that price, people want to be blown away and swept off their feet, and Nissan Stadium simply doesn't offer that. To do that, they need a better, more expensive stadium, and speaking of expensive, now, before you get a little too excited about the new Nashville Stadium, there are 3 reasons experts think this stadium is too tiny for its cash pouch. Initially, they planned on simply renovating the old stadium, but we all know they've decided to go for the much more expensive build a new one option. The state is ready to spend $2.2 billion building a new stadium, with more than half of that money, or $1.2 billion, coming directly from the government. But it's the other $1 billion that's the problem. You see, the Lee administration wants the state to take on $500 million worth of debt in the form of bonds, which is where the first problem comes into play. The first reason experts believe this project is too expensive is because Tennessee hasn't paid off the debt from the first stadium. To fund the $290 million project in the 90s, the state took on $50 million worth of debt in the form of 30-year bonds. The last bond will be paid off in 2029, and the state still needs to pay out $30 million. So, if it couldn't pay off $50 million, why does the current administration believe that they can afford $500 million of debt? Which brings us to the second problem: viability. You see, most economists agree that stadiums don't pay for themselves. So this means that the state taxpayers would inevitably have to pay for the $500 million worth of debt that the state plans to take on. And that's if the price stays at the $2.2 billion mark. This is where problem number 3 comes into question. First off, the $600 million worth of repairs for the Nissan Stadium easily ballooned to $1.2 billion, at which point the state opted for building a new stadium. What's to say that the $2.2 billion won't balloon to something much larger? We all know government contractors have no obligation to stick to their initial estimates. The SoFi Stadium in LA started at $2.66 billion, but once completed, it ballooned to over $5 billion. Not to mention, the new stadium would be much smaller than the current Nissan Stadium. It would only have 55,000 seats, which reduces the capacity of the original Nissan Stadium by 14,000 seats. We don't know how they managed to pay for a massive project like this by reducing the number of seats, the stadium's biggest revenue generator. And of course, the taxpayers would end up fronting those costs as well. In a state and city that has a problem picking up its trash, building a brand new stadium is the least of their worries. Nashville's Mayor Cooper pointed out that the city needs to focus on education, roads, public safety, and countless other basic services before spending billions on a new stadium. So, do you think Nashville should go and plunge $2.2 billion into a new stadium? Or do you think that money could be spent more wisely? Tell us in the comments down below. Now, here's another video mega project enthusiast enjoyed watching. Bye for now.